Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is home ownership consultant Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca, Canada's authority on home ownership. His website, thewealthyhomeowner.ca. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
Thanks for having me back, Jim.
Ross, people are wondering how you would interpret the stats for April housing released by the Canadian Real Estate Association.
Well, how do we interpret them? I guess we interpret them, Jim, the same way that we've interpreted them ever since we started doing your shows here with you. The public gets about, maybe if they're lucky, 20% of the information that's available on all the real estate boards across Canada's websites over the course of a month, and they get spin on it that is produced the way that Canadian Real Estate Association wants to release it. That's why, while on Friday, the Canadian Real Estate Association had already published on its own website what the average price was for April, the press didn't report it. The press didn't report it till Monday, even though it was available on the Canadian Real Estate Association's own website. It was published, but every single mainstream media outlet in Canada doesn't know where to look on their website to see where this is published. They keep it hidden. They kept it hidden because they wanted to put spin on it. The spin this month, as I'm sure everybody, is the market slowed. The market slowed is what they want to tell everybody. Oh, that's a pretty good story. The market is slowed. You just recorded the most number of sales for your members in the month of April in history. You just reported over the last 12 months a level of sales you have never reported before. But your spin is, oh, the market is slowing. Well, why would they want that narrative? Because all of a sudden the governments are starting to focus on housing, and they don't want that focus to happen. I'm sure that you didn't hear anywhere that they upgraded last year's average selling price by $2,000. So historically, Jim, they always downgrade the previous year's numbers, but this April, they upgraded last year's numbers. They took it from 488,000 to 490,000. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, folks, but you have to understand they do this every single month. They do this at every single real estate board. They do this at every single sub area of a real estate board. Every city, every place in Ontario, they make these manipulative moves to steer home buyers in the direction that real estate agents want them to go, which is buy houses for the highest price possible. What your listeners should understand is this year is not last year. And when we are looking at the sales numbers, because we understand the numbers that you're reading today are a consequence of things that started months ago in the housing market, which is why housing markets are so easy to forecast. And when we're looking at it, if we drew a line from January of 2019 through till April of 2021, when we look at the April of 2021 number, we would have expected to see zero. We would have expected that in March. Excuse me, folks. March this year, there were more sales than was possible. April, there were even more sales. Right now, folks, nationally, there are 70,000 Canadian homeowners who unintendedly own two homes. This is just the opposite of what it was as we entered the lockdown last time. You see, when we entered the lockdown last time, by May, there were 104,000 people who needed to buy a home because they were homeless. This time, it's just the opposite. They have to sell their homes during this lockdown or when the lockdown reopens. Many of your listeners will remember back a couple of years ago, 2017, 2018, there was a Toronto real estate board broker, one of those guys that appears on TV all the time, pretending to know what he's talking about. He convinced the Bank of Canada to include one of his charts and one of his analysis of MLS stat into their FSR. Not only did the bank include it, they included it and they said that it was real. It was the truth. What the story he was telling was this. He was telling people that current owners were buying their next house and then holding on to their existing home as an investment. They were greedy, in other words. They were part of the reason for the problem of the housing market. The Bank of Canada believed him, and they included it in his charts. Now, a skilled MLS transactional data reader would have told you this. The housing market peaked and crest. And what happened was there was so much self-assurance in the market, people were going out and buying their next home before their current home was sold. And then all of a sudden, the SFI rules came into effect in terms of impacting the market. So impact and effect, there's a period of time where that happens. What they were found out was the price they thought they could sell their home for after they had already purchased their second home, their next home, was not the same. They couldn't get enough money. And instead of selling their home at less than they thought that they were going to be able to get, they said, their real estate agent said, well, why don't you just rent it out? Now, you have to remember, folks, in this market where this chart referenced, the average buyer broker's commission was $30,000. So now you have a seller who's purchased another home for you, who's upset with you because you cannot get them what you told them you could get them for their house, and they've got to extrapolate, get themselves out of the situation. Their answer is quite simple. I've already made $30,000. How can I get that $30,000 and keep these people off my back? Not asking for a commission discount, not asking me to sell their home for free. Well, it's very simple. You tell them, oh, why don't you just hold on to the house? We know it's not worth right now what we thought it was going to be worth. So why don't you hold on to it for the market to return? Well, of course, those people listen to them. So the real reason that they held on to those two properties had nothing to do with speculative behavior. It had nothing to do with holding on to their existing home so they could seek house price gain. It was simply to wait till their house got back to what the price they thought it was going to be 2 months before. Now imagine the people today, Jim. 70,000 people, 70,000 existing homeowners are currently owning two homes. And the lockdown is ending. What are those people going to do? What are those people going to do? They have to sell. The housing market is already being cited as being slowing down. So in a month where you see a record gain in sales year over year, a gain that has never happened before, the real estate agents are already claiming it's slowing down. The manipulation of Canadian home buyers goes on every single month, Jim. When you read April home sales statistics, you have to read every single sentence. You have to understand the definitions and the meaning and the implications behind every single word. Organized real estate has used the last 70 years to perfect getting a message out. The Canadian press, being underfunded, repeats that message. So in a month, where the greatest increase year over year in sales took place between March and April, the Canadian press reports it as, oh, the housing market slowed down. You'll notice there's not one single news report, not one, where they talk about buyers, where they talk about owners right now owning two homes because they had gone out and purchased their next home, like they did back when that phony report went into the Bank of Canada report. The only thing this time, folks, it is a totally different degree of difficulty. And as we go forward, it's going to be really hilarious to watch the Canadian Real Estate Association announcing, trying to extract themselves from this situation. We warned a year ago this was a singular opportunity to watch housing markets across Canada all move in harmony. That has never happened in the history of Canadian real estate. Academics across this country have had an opportunity, if they knew how to do it, to watch how the Canadian public is manipulated by organized real estate. Sadly, most of the realtors, as including the one who made false statements and false data analysis to the Bank of Canada, they don't know how to read the data themselves.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, John in London, Ontario asks, Ross has suggested starting a family in Ontario planning to have 2 kids can allow home ownership while earning minimum wage. Does that still apply in 2021 after these record house price gains?
Sure, John. Sure. And here's how it goes. I'm assuming, okay, that combined, you're going to put in 80 hours a week between 2 people. Maybe one person works 60 hours or 50 hours, and the other person works 20 hours or 30 hours. I'm just going to assume that that's the model that you follow. I know that the governments, the Ontario government and the provincial government, is going to give you around $12,000 a year in credits because you have 2 kids and you earn minimum wage. There's about $10,000 in child tax benefit. And then there are GST rebates. There's a whole bunch of other rebates, grant transfers that you're able to get access to. So that's about $12,000 or about $1,000 a month. Well, $200,000 worth of mortgage, John, carries for around $900 a month, and that leaves you about $100 a month to pay your property taxes. So now that's $1,200 a month. Most municipalities, John, they're going to ask you to pay around $2,400 a month for a $200,000 house. So, or $2,400 a year for a $200,000 house. So you're going to have to take a little bit of your earnings out to pay those property taxes. But understand, John, $30 an hour, combining two minimum wage, double earners, a total of 80 hours a week, okay, or 40 hours times $30, which is $1,200. That's a week. Your housing costs are covered by the taxpayers. You can buy a car, John. You can go out there and do whatever you want. And knowing that homeowners, taxpayers, are going to cover your mortgage and almost all of your property tax. Now you say, well, Ross, what kind of house am I going to get for $200,000? Well, I'm going to tell you, you're not going to get a mansion. You're going to get a first-time starter. The same way that most parents started 40, 50 years ago. A small, tiny, wartime type home in some small community with a great school, close to a great hospital. Because you've got to remember, John, in Canada, our governments fund our health care for us. So if our net taxes are zero, we still get our health care covered. You can structure your life, John, on double minimum wage, own a house, and not actually pay any taxes. The only taxes you're going to pay, John, are your GST or your HST, which in Ontario you're looking at 13%. So whatever you buy, you're going to have to pay 13% tax on. That's the only tax revenue they're going to get from you. And since you're getting more than what you're handing over, you've got a great windfall. Look, John, there's a number what we tell people in your situation, and it's called income efficiency. Where is the place where you can live, where your income can be the most efficiently used? Now, the most efficient income you can collect is income where you pay no taxes. So you have to look at the structure of all the taxes that you pay: federal tax, provincial tax, municipal tax, a goods and services tax. You got to look at all those taxes, and you got to find out how you can pay the lowest amount of your income to taxes, and that will determine how efficient the income that you've earned actually is. Because income that you earn that goes to taxes is not money you have available to you. It's inefficient. The efficient income is the actual dollars. If you earn $10 or $100, how many dollars do you actually get to use yourself? Do you get to use 80? Do you get to use 70? Do you get to use 90? 100? Do you get to use all 100 of those dollars? And that's really what it comes down to. There are people in that situation you're talking about, John, where their effective income is higher than what their actual income is because transfers support it. So what I'm telling you is this, John. Yes, there are houses in London, Ontario today that you and your spouse can be out working a grand total, 80 hours combined per week, minimum wage, Walmart, McDonald's, busing tables, whatever you can find, where the Ontario taxpayer, the Canadian taxpayer, will effectively pay off your home for you. If you get started young enough and you are very careful with what you're doing, you can actually have a 17-year amortization on that mortgage, on that house. And by the time that the kids are ready to go off to school, the mortgage is paid off. Now, this isn't going to work in Toronto because a garage is going to cost you $200,000. And the number that I'm talking, you probably could stretch it, John, probably up to around 240, depending on how you play with the numbers. Go another 100,000 more. What's the big difference? You're working a combined 80 hours a week. You're pulling in that money. The taxpayer is paying for the house. Yeah, imagine the life you can give your kids. You can be available for every sporting event the kids want to go to. When the kids want to go camping, you can go camping with the kids. When the kids need a new bike, you've got the money to do it. Remember, your health care is covered by the country we live in. And in many ways right now, your wealth is covered because the structure of how the taxation system works to the advantage of people in the situation that we're describing. Look, John, you're hearing all this talk about people moving out of the big cities. This is how you look at it. Here are people who sell $1 million, $1.2 million house, and they move to an outer city and spend $600,000. Okay, so they pay off their $400,000 mortgage, and they have an extra $200,000-$300,000 left over after they move. They're in a better quality of house than what they were in the city, say in Toronto, for the sake of the argument. They're in a better school district, better. Quality of life is simply better, other than going to your local restaurants or to the show. Okay, your quality of life is better. Now these people have $200,000-$300,000 in the bank. Well, imagine, what is the real amount of income you have to earn to put both your kids in daycare, to offset the tax differential because you're moving into a higher tax bracket, and then what are you giving up in the process? I'm not saying this is the right path, John. You posed the question. So yes, this is still possible. The vast majority of Canadians will not accept the lifestyle that results. They're going to even question their own self-worth, and we don't see it that way. Our perspective is this: wherever you can live the most efficiently, and where your wealth can be growing at the most efficient rate possible, that makes the best sense of where to live. When you're talking minimum wage, or even $20, $22, $23, $24 an hour, $48,000 a year, there is no way of efficiently living in a city like Vancouver or Toronto. If you want to do it, that's your choice. Yes, you can still have the dream of having taxpayers pay off your home in London, Ontario in 2021.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, all of a sudden bank economists are on the supply bandwagon and are now promoting house price unaffordability can only be lessened by more supply. Carol in Abbotsford, BC, which is about an hour east of Vancouver, asks, how are we ever going to see enough new supply of homes that the bankers are now calling for begin to be built? And I have to remind you, while there's a record housing start across Canada, not in BC. For some reason, because of red tape, housing starts in British Columbia are on the decline and have been for the last 2 years.
Okay, so the way that we measure housing supply, Jim, it's been declining now for 2 decades. That's how we measure supply. We don't measure it the same way everybody else does. The bank economists now are trying to extract themselves from all of the record mortgage debt that they've helped book at their banks. They're now seeing the red flags all over the place that they're going to be caught. So now they throw in the red herring of supply. Look, if you're being honest in your housing analysis, you need to have gone back around 2008. And at that time, you needed to tell everybody, we are underbuilding. We are not building enough supply. That's right. We're talking, 14 years ago is when this conversation should have started. It should have intensified around 2013, where it's obvious that there is an imbalance between the demographics of the population and the composition of the housing stock. Now, you're not going to look out there and hear the words composition of the housing stock. Look, before we mentioned on the show a couple of weeks ago or a couple months ago about the crest of a housing market, you never heard the word crest appear in any bank report. But now magically, after our reports go out, all the banks are using the word crest. This is the exact same thing with this housing supply issue. The composition of the housing stock needs to be monitored as it relates to the composition of the Canadian population. In other words, if you know that the population is aging, but you know that the population is staying healthier when they age, you know that they're not going to be leaving their single detached homes so the next generation can move in. If you know you're going to be importing a higher population by increasing your immigration, or maybe by allowing your universities to have a whole bunch of foreign students take away rental housing units from the regular Canadians, you should have been responsibly acting and building supply. Carol, there is never a supply solution immediately, because supply is going to take you 5 to 7 years to begin to adjust for changes in demographics. You need intelligent politicians who are fully trained in how a housing stock has to evolve to enact policies. Now, we don't have that anywhere in North America today, because if we did, we would have seen the correct housing stock being built. This missing middle myth that we have right now, the missing middle myth is simply would allow people in condos to sell their condo and buy a townhouse. Okay, that's all it would allow. It's not going to allow the people who are in a condo who want a single detached home to get a single detached home. When these bank economists are now talking about supplies to blame, no, what's to blame is this. The banks, through their own ignorance or through their own complicity, have worked in tandem with organized real estate to create house price illusion, which has made house prices as high as they are today. As we said in the previous 2 sections, you have had a full year of data available to you in any MLS system in this country to set back and separate, look at a granular view of that data and to see how every single penny of house price change was recorded. It didn't happen because house prices changed in a month. It happened because the amount of illusion that was able to be created in a month, which was allowed to be claimed to be the truth the following month when realtors were listing their new homes. It doesn't make any sense that 20% of the homes on the market sell in a month and 80% of the homes don't, meaning you can purchase 80% of the homes the following month for the same price, but then you claim house prices went up. If 80% of the homes didn't go up in price, then clearly house prices didn't go up, because I can still buy that house for the same price or less than what I did the month or 2 months before. Let's say that you get up to 60%. So 40% of the homes sell, and 40% of the homes that are listed sell what they were listed for or higher, but 60% don't sell and subsequently sell for the previous price or less. Clearly, 60% means house prices didn't go up. Why do you keep cherry picking the 20, 30, or 40% that did sell? Well, it's very quite simple. So that you can get commission. The supply side discussion that is now taking place with the banks, Benny Talltales at CIBC, Kovacs at DMO, where were these guys 8 years ago when Polaz first took over the Bank of Canada? Where were they warning anywhere in any of their reports that the Canadian housing stock was undersupplied based on the categories of families that existed in this country? When we were bringing new people into Canada to become Canadians, welcoming them into our country, where were these bank economists saying, oh, we need to build, if we're going to bring a new family in, we need to build a new housing unit, and it needs to be reflective of what that family is going to look like. Oh, and we need to build more housing supply based on our current children, which are entering adulthood, getting married, starting to have kids, and ready to buy a house. We need to build that housing supply. Why are we building housing supply only for single people who want to live in a teeny tiny condo in the big cities? The bank economists are now caught. They have had years and years and years to look at the data, look at the composition of the Canadian housing stock or provincial housing stock or regional housing stock, compare it against the population, the demographics that exist in that neighborhood, changes that we all know from StatsCan can be measured every single year. The worst you're going to be out is 1 year. Why were they silent? Well, it's very simple. They wanted to grow their mortgage books at a record pace in order to earn the greatest amount of profit for their shareholders. As they report bank earnings this week, next week, you're going to hear records again. And what your listeners should understand is we have to look right now. They may get another record quarter by the end of June. The amount of mortgage debt that is going to be booked right now, we're still doing calculations on it. So our mortgage debt forecasts, normally we can do them 3 to 4 months out. Right now, because the sales mix is so skewed towards trade-up buyers and has been for the last 3 months, that our calculations have to be a little more complex. Obviously, if an existing homeowner has seen their house sells their house for $200,000 more this year than what they could have got for it last year, and they're only purchasing a home that is $100,000 more expensive, we need to adjust that in our mortgage data. But the records that you're going to hear over the next 2 weeks, folks, is solely a result of the bank economists keeping their mouths shut. The bank economists saying the Canadian Real Estate Association is telling us the truth. The average home was worth $697,000. Well, folks, over 72% of all the listings that were on Realtor.ca in the month of April could be purchased for less than $697,000. So when you can buy 72% of all the houses on market for less than what the average is, clearly, trade-up buyers are dominating the market. Where were the bank economists debunking average house price gains? Clearly, when first-time buyers' share of sales is at a record low, which we see with minus 70,000 nationally of double sales right now. In other words, homeowners who now own 2 homes. That's the only way you get 20% year-over-year house price gain nationally, folks. It's the only way you can reach that number. There's no other mathematical way of reaching those type of claims. Why were they silent? The same as the supply, Jim. They simply don't monitor the housing stock on a compositional basis, which is what we do, not only at a provincial, regional, municipal, but actually right at the community neighborhood level when we're forecasting. Why were they silent? That, Carol, is what you're going to have to say. But what I'll tell you is this. A house price correction is not triggered by a supply side differential, an increase in supply. A house price correction is simply a function of the home trading infrastructure, the trading cycle, reaching its peak and then going down the other side. When you have minus 70,000 sales in the queue, you should really be thinking about what's going to be happening going forward.
Ross, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me on, Jim.
My guest has been home ownership consultant Ross Kay from the wealthyhomeowner.ca. If you have any questions for Ross, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HouseStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HouseStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HouseStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.